Temba Sanje Jumden, Benyawa Shaja Duba Ma Chaze Mo Chudo Jasu, Temba Jumden, the Shinshaban, Jajumba Yanda Ban Zobes, Ribada Shazon Temban, Devarishaban, Jidinba, Jibundu, Kalo Juba Lana Meva Lada Milam Jetemba Sanje Jumden, Benyawa Shaja Duba La Chaze Mo Chudo Jasu, Temba Jumden, the Shinshaban, Jajumba Yanda Ban Zobes, Ribada Shazon Temban, Devarishaban, Jidinba, Jibundu. Kalojiva Lana Meva Lada Milam Jetemba Sanje Jumden, Benjawa Shaja Duba La Chaze Mo Chudo Jasu, Kanze Ganyan Zowa Jadam Zaya Sajen Dena Komba Tembra, Manen Jiden Dena Churches on Teze Keva Jama Chahaz, Namda Gonga Chodo Susanwa Yishi Jato Sergio Nombo, Chaba Jiden Sumna Lamia Gombo Chonye Jala Chahaz, Senjon Demba Chimenda Veshe, Sendo Jawa Jala Chahaz, the Jela Seva Suma Jenyame Chenje Jala Chahaz. Gombo to Jeche and bottom J. Campbell, the Solomon Yuden, the Jinshala Charles and Taben Deja Tower giving us on the Cheddar to Namisha Yovash and Jojo Charles and Turner to Lava Tala Rabdune, Shinga Tamba Yuden, then get you on your Charles. The Vajia Mejajan gave up his own so much Rangasim, the Yozu tennis on Jet Temple. Karmara Rima Meda Jumasiva Churda Melam Lota Jinda Deje Janum Dedrata Sonum Dia Tamjeseva Yakovatum the Kinja Gada Nada Shiva Labjube Sibeson Joan Jovarejo
to the teacher,
that's one year, the four destroyed, the complete, fully awakened, perfect knowledge and good conduct, Sugata Lord of the world. Supreme guide beings, teacher of gods and humans, to you the complete and fully awakened, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer of the second plan, I prostrate make offerings and go for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one, the one beyond, the four destroyed, the completely perfect, fully awakened, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, Lord of the world. Supreme guide beings to the teacher of gods and humans, to you the completed and awakened, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer of the second, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge.
The teacher, the blessed one, the one
from beyond, the four destroyed, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, Lord of the world. Supreme guide beings to the teacher of gods and humans, to you the completed and fully awakened, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer of the psychic plan, I prostrate my offerings and go for
when you supreme among humans, you upon this earth, you paced out seven strides and said, I
am supreme in this world. To you who I stand, I prostrate.
With the pure bodies,
form supremely pure, wisdom ocean by the golden mountain, fame that blazes in the three worlds, winner of the best, to you I prostrate.
with the
Supreme sign, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. You are immaculate, the three worlds alone, incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate.
The Savior
having great compassion, the teacher having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like vast ocean. To you, the one gone to dustness, I prostrate.
the purity which makes one free from attachment,
The virtues which frees one from the lower realm, the one path, sublime and pure reality, to that dharma which pacifies I prostrate. Those who liberate also show the path to the virtues, the holy pure qualify the realization, who are devoted to the moral precept, to you the sublime community and tender language.
Do not commit
And
any
in the virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see condition things as such. Through this merit, the ascension beings attain equivalency, subdue the brutal cause, be
delivered from motion of suffering,
age, sickness, and death. Sanje Chono, Zoje Chono, Chanju Pando, Dangin Jeso Jebe, Sono, Jendola Pinche, Sanje Drupa, Sanje Chono, Zoje Chono, Chanju Pando, Dangin Jeso Jebe, Sono, Jendola Pinche, Sanje Drupa, Sanje Chono, Zoje Chono, Chanju Pando, Dangin Jeso Jebe, Sono, Jendola Pinche, Sanje Drupa, Sanje Chono, Zoje Chono, Chanju Pando, Dangin Jeso Jebe, Sono, Jendola Pinche, Sanje Drupa, refuge until I'm enlightened through the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, through the merit of creating and practicing giving and other perfections. May I quickly attain the state of Buddha for the benefit of all sentients. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened through the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, through the merit of creating, practicing giving and other perfections. May I quickly attain the state of Buddha for the benefit of all sentients. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened through the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create, practicing giving and other perfections. May I quickly attain the state of Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. Pumea Bumba Legime de la Bume de Medicine Babu de Medicine Bakaji. Kede Sanje Bumba Latene Rajile, Rajile de Medicine, Kaji Shinging with the Telanya, Kaji Danyim, the Chita, the Shinshawaju. Kede Raji Yemana Shingo Yubacha, Rajeta, the Moto, the Shishi, the Kang. Kede Bumba Madame de Shinshawanga, Tina, Tatu, Tenet, Pumba Lama de Medicine. Kashima de Yemana didn't shut on your land in your number, your liberty, your number. The Shisha Bajim and Lombang and the Zation, Kajitin Yashin, the Mebe, the Shisha about the Yawan liberty. Kashi and your number, the dinner Rajin, Dagon will come with the Shem of the Yuri again. Tezranya Lanya number when you don't when you don't be the Shisha, don't watch it up. Don't watch it, don't see you. Neither you may measure than the bed in the Javaja, Tada Medona, Shivanda. She was the Lacanonia congregation and the bottle was on telling you the budget of the Tobach. Rajin in the Don de la Sanjay and then the Yodish, Sambatevan, the Sanjay 27. Trevenia, what they went the Shinship was to make the Shinship Rajim and then the Rajim, the Shinship Rajim. Dondi Rajim and the Shinship of a session on the rubbish, Shuniva, Kangi Jadanji, the Sudan in the Bonjo. Okay, now, Chandrakirti. Page, I think, looks like presenting the 10 ground collectively. So previously, presenting the
Page 63, is that correct?
Yeah. Okay, page 63 is presenting the 10 ground collectively. The explanation here of 11 ground, such as the perfect joy, is based on the following passage in the Precious Galim, where the broad presentation of 10 or 11 ground is given. So just as the 8 Śrāvakas grounds are taught in the Śrāvakas vehicle, the 10 bodhisattvas grounds are found in the great vehicle. So 8 Śrāvakas, so it's also used the term the ground. Yeah, in Tibetan we say sa. in the Hindi, bhumi, right? So the sa or ground means is the locus of the quality that continuously flourishing or increasing, right? So 8 ground, like entering, Yunshu, like yes. I forgot those names in English. Yunshu, entry, the fruit of the entry, and once return, no more return, and no more learning. So each fruit has its own entry, right? How you enter into the first ground, and the second ground, and the fourth ground, and fifth ground, like that. So kind of entry, each fruit, like first entry in the noble path has kind of it's so first entering in the noble path. The second fruit is once return in the noble path, and no more returning as a noble path, and no more learning is the arhat state. So in the Śrāvakas vehicle. So each fruit has its own kind of continuum or the preceding condition of each fruits. So including the 8 ground, they call 8 ground, and the similar has in the bodhisattvas the 10 ground or 11 ground. So starting from the noble wisdom, the path of seeing, and the path of meditations, and the Buddhas, rather, state of Buddha. So starting from the path of seeing, there's a 10 ground for the Mahayana, right? 10 ground, 10 bhumis. So anyway, yes, Chandrakirti also based his presentation on the 10 ground sutra. Here, the characterizations of the 10 ground, such as perfect joy. So this is the perfect joy is the name of the first ground, right? And the perfect morality is the second ground. So 6 perfections. Perfect joy as the 10 awakening mind must be understood in terms of the ultimate awakening mind. Now, previously, we already talked about the awakening mind, bodhicitta, enlightened mind, and all same, right? Awakening mind. So awakening mind means changjuk sem, bodhicitta. So the bodhicitta, bodhi is the enlightenment or the buddhahood. Chit means mind, the minding on attaining the buddhahood. That, induced by the great compassion, right? Induced by the great compassion and having, aspiring to attain the buddhahood is called in awakening mind. So awakening mind, right? I don't know why this used the awakening mind. So usually, if you literally, when we kind of translate that, bodhi chitta, bodhi is buddhahood, chit means consciousness or the mind, right? The mind of Buddha or minding on Buddha, right? Or this is similar, aspiring to attain the Buddhahood. Mind that has the aspirations to attain the Buddhahood is enlightened, the awakening mind. And then a little bit different here, ultimate awakening minds. And then this kind of, has different definitions. Ultimate awakening mind. The ultimate awakening mind means this awakening mind is a realization of emptiness, not the aspiration to attaining the Buddhahood. So ultimate awakening mind is realization emptiness. And then particularly, this is the noble wisdom. So therefore, direct realization of emptiness, of bodhisattvas, noble being, is ultimate awakening mind. So the 10 ground is divided, or kind of 10 ground means this direct realization of emptiness of the bodhisattvas is divided into 10. Right? Direct realization emptiness divided in the 10 divided in the 10 pieces or 10, right? So then that called like 10 ground. So all this ultimate 10 ground is known through the direct realization emptiness. And then why, if all the direct realization emptiness, all these 10 bhumis, noble wisdom, directly perceiving the emptiness, and so how you make, right, a difference, a different shade. This is the first bhumi, and that is the second bhumi. So then there's the qualities. So each realization, although in terms of realizing emptiness is equal, same, right, they're equal, but through through that wisdom and generating or producing different qualities. First bhumi produces the certain qualities, and then second bhumi has much more qualities, and then third bhumi and triples, right? So that in that way, so in this way you divide it. So the bhumis, the wisdom itself, all of them are directly perceiving emptiness. There's no difference in the object that you're not object that you're perceiving. Realization emptiness is also equally same. So so that must be understood in terms of ultimate awakening mind. The commentary, they characterize the nature of the 10 ground as the ultimate awakening mind in the following. When uncontaminated nourishes of the bodhisattvas. So this is what the commentary says. The commentary, Chandrakirti is his own commentary on his root text, and he presents like this: when the uncontaminated nourishes of the bodhisattvas, means, right, bodhisattvas, noble beings, wisdom, which is directly perceiving emptiness, right, when the uncontaminated nourishes of the bodhisattvas, which is sustained by compassion and so on, right? So this wisdom realizing emptiness of the first bhumi sustained or associated or underpinned with compassion and others, means generosity, patience, morality, concentrations, all of them, right? Sustained by those method factors and divided ins. So then that wisdom, the very wisdom that perceiving emptiness directly divided in terms of its facts, right? So first bhumi, second bhumi is like, it acquires the name ground. So therefore, then this got a name of Bhumi. Because wisdom directly perceiving wisdom realizing emptiness, which produces the quality, right? And then that doubles in the next level, triples in the third level. So that's why it given the name of ground. So that when the ground, it gives rise to different sprouts, right? Right. So so this is like a field when you plant something and continuously giving rise to the sprout, and that keep increasing, right? Sprout from the leaves, and from that leaves and branches, and then the flowers and the fruits. So in this way it grows. So that's why it's giving a name a ground, right? A Bhumi. For it constitutes the locus of the qualities. It also kind of given a name because it contains those qualities. It keeps those qualities. So why this give a name ground? I mean, it produces, it holds. So therefore, each realization of the bodhisattvas, the wisdom is kind of giving a name as a ground. So this commentary already kind of, describe very precisely. So Bhumi, the 10 Bhumi is divided from uncontaminated wisdom realizing emptiness of the bodhisattvas, noble beings, right? And then that's sustained by the method factors like compassion, bodhicitta, and practice of generosity, morality, patience, all this. So that the very uncontaminated, the wisdom of the bodhisattva's noble being, so also plays as a ground that producing the qualities, and it holds these qualities, right? So that's why it's giving the name a ground. In the above, the ground, uncontaminated nourishes is explained through 4 factors. Its nature, so nature, uncontaminated nourishes of the bodhisattvas. So it's giving, that's kind of describes the nature of this first ground, and what sustained it thoroughly. So it's sustained by compassion and generosities and morality and patience like that. And how it acquired the name. So how it got this name of ground. So because it constitutes the locus of the qualities, right? Or it produces the quality. So that's why it's giving a name of ground. And etymology of its names. So something that continuously giving rise to flourishing, the quality from it, right? So therefore, it's a ground. Some explain the nature of uncontaminated nourishes using the definition found in the treasure of Abhidhamma in terms of, so Abhidhamma, the Vasubandhu's text. So in his text, the definition of uncontaminated is not suitable for enhancing contaminations. So in the Abhidhamma Vasubandhu text, Sakwa Jesu Miroas, right? Sakwa Jesu Miroas not suitable for enhancing contamination. Or you can say by perceiving by perceiving such, and there is no afflictive emotions grow from it. Right. So, and what are the contaminated factors? This body is the contaminated. This table, this house, this car, and trees, right? So by perceiving or conceiving, imagining, there's always possible of growing afflictive emotions, enhancing afflictive emotions. Therefore, by definitions, all these are contaminated phenomena. You remember that 4 seals of Buddhist doctrine, right? All conditioned phenomena is impermanent. All conditioned phenomena, conditional suffering, right? And all phenomena are empty of the intrinsic existence. And then the last seals of Buddhist doctrine is nirvana is peace. Yeah, so this is kind of, some people all time, some people think Buddha Shakyamuni, when he teaches the Varanasis, first turning wheel of the Dharma, Buddha talk about starting from the condition of suffering. Buddha mentioned suffering, the cause of the suffering. So, and now, according to the Vasubandhu's, his knowledge, his understanding, and kind of the definition of uncontaminated means, right, things that are imagining, conceiving, and not suitable to enhancing the afflictive emotions is known as uncontaminated. So this suggests the lack of understanding the unique meaning of what it means to be uncontaminated according to this system of Chandrakirti. Now, Chandrakirti has a different definitions. So, by definition from the Vasubandhu, and then this is space become uncontaminated. So there is not suitable for generating anger, attachment, jealousy, just by kind of perceiving, imagining the space, like oceans, right? So, so in the Chandrakirti says, so the definition that you are defining uncontaminated is lack of understanding of what is contaminated. So who can contaminate space? What can contaminate space? If there's nothing contaminated space, how can space become uncontaminated? Right. So, so Chandrakirti's definitions, our own position is this. So what is contaminated is tainted either by ignorance or ignorance, grasping at true existing, or by the imprints such ignorance. Out of ignorance, or out of imprints of the ignorance, right? Something that is polluting in your perceptions, right? So, so sometimes it's called a cataract of ignorance, maribarari. Yeah, cataract of ignorance. So I think we all have this cataract. So when we think about, for example, when we see the color through the eye consciousness, and then thought consciousness, right after that, thought consciousness believes the color that perceived by eye consciousness is independent from the consciousness itself, independent from the I sense power itself. So that is already the cataract from ignorance. So there is the extreme kind of, the grasping at truly existing of the color. And then thought consciousness, that imagining car or house or anything. So thought consciousness has to go thought consciousness, when it perceive or conceive things, it always has to go through its own creation, mediation. So this is like a blind person's trying to reach the certain place by, relying on counting the steps, all right, or any kind of by touching the walls or things like that. So thought consciousness, like blind persons, were trying to reach things through the mediations, right? So anyway, so this is the free from intent. So Chandrakirti says, my definition of uncontaminated is contamination, the free from the contamination of the ignorance and the imprints of the ignorance. So, so this is stated in Chandrakirti's the clear words. From the perspective of the nature of, that is object of uncontaminated nourishes, free from obscuring cataract of ignorance, things do not exist until the attainment of the Buddha's ground. The only mental state not tainted by the imprints of the ignorance is the non-conceptual nourishes of Arya, Arya in meditative equipoise. So now, definition here, the uncontaminated means the kind of free from the taint or free from the stain of ignorance and imprints. So then say, so which part of the sentient being's mind or kind of any quality that is uncontaminated? So then Bodhisattvas, noble beings, meditative equipoise is only uncontaminated. So what happened when he come out from the meditation? And then all the perceptions are contaminated. Either Bodhisattvas, noble being, and not really overpowered by the misconceptions, but there's the influence, right, from the imprints of the ignorance. So any mind or any mental state that still gets the influence of the imprints of the afflictive emotion, so that still count as a contaminated. So that's Chandrakirti, So then Bodhisattva, noble beings, their body, right? Their physical body is the by this definition is contaminated. And the Bodhisattva, noble being, the first Bhumi or second Bhumi, how many times they kind of reincarnate. So all the incarnations are considered as contaminated. So without the imprints of the afflictive emotions, so you cannot be born in samsara. So noble being, many times they're born in samsara. So
So the contamination, that depending on how you kind of, so if the angle, when you see how much through these contaminations bodhisattvas can get benefit. So the contamination of the imprints of the ignorance, by using that to reborn again and again, so they are able to perfect the six perfections. So for them, the obstacles is no longer being able to obscure them. Obstacles are a useful factor for the bodhisattvas to perfect their realization, perfect their qualities. Yeah, in the Buddhism, in the Mahayana Sutras, Mahayana practice, even the suffering is not kind of suffering, never considered needed to be abandoned. Suffering is the most kind of useful tool to to improve their compassions, purifications, and practice of the generosities and the patience, the moralities. So that's why the human drum is more precious than the God drum. Right? So the God being, they do not have the suffering like human being. So they are not able to generate the great compassion, the bodhicitta. So, and also mention the karuna, right? Compassion as karuna. So as there's a kind of negative and negation word, negative words there. Karuna is dengo, means no peace. Right? So the kind of experiencing the pain, kind of experiencing the pain from knowing the suffering of others. So they are able to gain perfect, or they are able to gain deep satisfaction, joy, courage, confidence. Right. So this pain is not like a kind of pain can overpower on you. This pain is become the condition to generate to produce more qualities, like in bitterness and the chocolate, right? So in the Four Noble Truths also mentioned Buddha and truth of suffering to understand, to realize, cause the truth of original suffering need to be abandoned. Truth of path to meditate, truth of cessation to actualize. This is what Buddha says, right? Buddha did not say suffering need to be abandoned, right? Suffering to understand, cause of the suffering to abandon, right? Path to meditate, the cessation to actualize. So so here the two kind of definitions: Vasubandhu's text and the Chandrakirti's his own position, on his own position. Yeah. Until the attainment of the Buddhahood ground, the only mental state not tainted by imprints of the ignorance is the non-conceptual nourishes of Arya. So that means within the sentient beings, right? Beings who are not Buddha, So two Arya beings, right? Śrāvakas and Bhartika Buddha, and Bodhisattvas, noble beings. Their direct realization emptiness are known as the uncontaminated. Such gnosis comes about only as a intermittently. Intermittently means intermittent is a short time,
Happens here again.
like
Not-
patterns.
Not continuous.
Comes and goes.
Yeah, comes and go. Yeah. so intermittently means when there are deep in meditative equipoise, that wisdom is uncontaminated. When they kind of the minute they're coming out from their meditations, eye conscious, nose conscious, tongue conscious, the mental consciousness, all now again coming back to contaminate, because it's start kind of getting the influence from the imprints of the afflictive emotions. Meditative equipoise, their mental state are once again tainted by the imprints of the ignorance. The taint of ignorance exists up until the 7th ground. So the kind of taint from the ignorance is until the 7th ground. Right after the 7th ground, they have become with noble bodhisattvas, free from all afflictive emotions, free from misconceptions, no delusions. Right. So the 8th bhumi, starting from the 8th bhumi, there is no afflictive emotions, there is no ignorance. But still, the imprints of the ignorance that remain within the state of mind. So when 8, 9, 10, the 10, when you free from even the stain of the ignorance, then become the 11th ground as a buddhahood, right? Buddha. So the types of the stain of ignorance itself disappears for those on the 8th ground and up 8th ground and up 9th and 10th, right? As well as for the 2 types of arhat, Śrāvakas and Pradika Buddhas. Since the polluting ignorance has ceased, the ignorance itself has ceased, but they still possess the taints in the form of residual, the imprints of ignorance. Again, when the commentaries refer to the 1st ground as which bears the name of nondual wisdom, it's saying that gnosis is free from dualistically perceiving subject and object as a separate from each other. It is not referring merely to a gnosis free from 2 extreme. So 2 extreme means exaggerations and the annihilations, right? So not dualistic, non-dualistic does not mean it's free from 2 extreme. So it's free from the appearance of the subject and object as separate phenomena. So which means meditative equipoise means when the mind kind of observing, right, directly observing in emptiness, and in the face of that very wisdom, has no notion of subject and object. It's just you put the milk and water in the milk, or milk and water, it becomes inseparable. Right? The wisdom that directly meditative equipoise, right, directly observing in emptiness, has no notion of subject and object as 2 separate phenomena. So therefore you call non-dualistically perceiving.
Geshe, I don't understand something here. We're saying this is non-dualistic fundamentally, but at the same time, we're saying we haven't eliminated two extremes of existence and non-existence. So this means, it sounds to me like there's still duality. I mean, on the one hand, we're saying there's no duality, there's no subject and object. But on the other hand, there's the duality still remaining of existence and non-existence. So I'm puzzled here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very good. Good puzzles. So this is like a duality and non-duality, and kind of should understood in the relation with subject and object within the mind and object. It's not talking about generally is there dualistic or is there non-dualistic. So that does not make sense at all, and generally. So dualistic mind, non-dualistic mind. For example, dualistic mind, eye consciousness, right? Eye consciousness, which is seeing the color. So there is dualistically perceiving the color. So eye consciousness knows the color that it's seeing is out there, right? So then conceptual, right? All the conceptual mind and dualistically perceiving the object, because they're like, right? So when you imagine the car, right, you parked at the parking lot. So you have to imagine. So my car is in the house there, and that side, or that's this side. So the object, so the subject, the mind is perceiving object is something separate, right? There is already experiencing or notions within the subject, knowing the object they're perceiving is out there. So that's called dualistically perceiving. So when the wisdom realizing emptiness, directly abided within the emptiness, then it does not see the difference between mind, wisdom itself, and the object that perceiving it. So wisdom realizing emptiness, direct wisdom realizing emptiness, right? So direct perception of the wisdom realizing emptiness. So it has no sense of knowing what is the mind, what is the object they're perceiving. So that's called non-dualistically perceiving. Yes, it is realizing, it is aware of something, but what is that mind is aware of is no separate from the mind itself. So non-dualistically perceiving. And so so there's another way in the Asanga text. There's a two kind of, so this is very conventional. There's two separate things. When you are meditating on compassion, when you are meditating on impermanence, there's a two different things. So mind that is meditating on the compassions, right? Meditating on the compassion, right? So mind itself is, there is no notion within the mind itself being separate from what is meditating on. For example, when you try to recognize what is attachment, so the very mind that which is trying to understand attachment, right? So that very mind is perceiving attachment in non-dualistically. So when you think about color, house, and the dualistic, because when the mind tries to understand or try to recognize attachment, mind itself has to be kind of, in the form of attachment. So mind become the mind which is kind of closely looking at attachment. Mind also pretend like attachment. So mind perceiving another mind is non-dualistically perceiving. So when you meditate on anger, you think about how anger, what is the anger, right? And then when you start to kind of, when you cognize that the kind of state of mind which is anger, we try to understand it. So the mind itself become, right, is kind of, it has to pretend like anger. So one mind perceiving another mind is non-dualistically. It's totally different mind is thinking about the trees, house, other peoples. So non-dualistic always has to bring in a relation with subject and object. So generally, wisdom realizing emptiness, the emptiness, right, and generally is two separate phenomena. One is object, one is subject, because two separate and conventional. So when you kind of and generally asking question, is wisdom realizing emptiness and emptiness are dualistic or non-dualistic? The question in the conventional, the answer has to be in the conventional. So the conventionally, yes, it is separate because one is subject, one is object. When the same question, when you question to the wisdom itself, and wisdom is just muted, has no expressions. The wisdom that is very much abided within the emptiness has no notion of the object and subject. So you just kind of, this dualistically or non-dualistically, like thought perceiving the tree, thought perceiving the anger, right? Your mind is perceiving another state of mind. Is always non-dualistic because mind itself has to pretend like that mind, right? So the dualistic, non-dualistics, the question and answer could not be found. There is no question answer in general. It has to always go with the relation, subject and object. This very mind, is it directly perceiving or indirectly perceiving? It is perceiving the object separately or non-separately. So in the clairvoyance, sometimes they say the clairvoyance, some people they're saying people has the clairvoyance to know what is going in your mind, right? So this clairvoyance, the mind kind of the state of mind that knowing your mind, this mind has to act like your mind. Otherwise, they cannot experience. So the clairvoyance always like that. And then, the ornament of realizations, right? kind of has mentioned how do those people who train the clairvoyants, they said they study of physical expressions. So once you are very master in physical expressions, and then you develop this kind of sense of clear mind. And that clear mind of clairvoyance is sustained or supported by the single-pointed meditations. Then without any indications, without seeing you, I can sense your mind. But the first you have to go through the study of the reading the expressions. Or this sign means that, this sign means this, right? So right now I'm saying dualistically perceiving and non-dualistically perceiving, right? Yeah, anytime when you see with eye, anything that you experience with tongue, all finger go with you, there, this, right? So when you imagine, what is the attachment? And there's no finger, it has no work, right? It's just you just make other mind in the form of very much like your mind. Your mind has to be kind of comes in the form of that very mind. Deliberately, one of your mind making, right, playing attachment. So because it is deliberately happening, doing, so there is sense of knowing, oh, attachment do like this. Attachment is perceiving this way, right? So this kind of, there is the kind of, it's not, normally when we develop anger, it's involuntarily, not deliberately, right? You don't develop anger intentionally, right? So then, then there is no kind of, there's no sense of knowing what is wrong with my mind. So when you deliberately generates the one mind, like anger, then that mind can make you understand what is the anger, what is the consequences, how it experiences. So those mind-to-mind understanding is non-dualistically. So this is like, like a mold. You put substance and clay in the mold and the prints, right? So it looks like that mold, right? When you make statues out of mold and small stupas, right? So it gets the prints very alike with what printed in the mold. So the mind to mind is like a printing. So one mind to understanding another mind. So this very mind who is trying to understand the anger, this mind has to print it like that anger. Because this is happening deliberately, intentionally, so there is the process that you are knowing, oh, the anger is like this. Yeah, some people may ask, and then if this is the kind of, if you're trying to make up one mind look like anger, and then in that way you can understand anger. So why people always, when they get angry, why don't they know the nature of the anger? Because it's not deliberately, it's spontaneously, uncontrollably, involuntarily, right? So this is how we, in the school, when some teacher force the student, right, to memorize things. So that the student can memorize, but there is no understanding of that lines that's coming out their mouth. So like you are forced to learn things. So it's just kind of, by force you are trying to imitate. So dualistic, non-dualistic like that. And this is free from two extremes. This master, on numerous occasions in his writing, the speak of wisdom and nourishes free from the cataract of ignorance. Therefore, when those who take ignorance and its imprint to be universal property of awareness assert that when these two, ignorance and its imprints, ceases, the nourishes too become no more, and maintain that such is the standpoint of this master, they are in fact, committing serious denigration, right? Denigration of the masters. For this is similar to the view of non-Buddhist Mañjuśrī, who maintains that when the pollutants are exhausted, mind too comes to cease. The claim that there is no nourishes during the Aya meditative equipoise is also similar to the view in the precious God, in the views. So, this is the Samkhya school and the Jebawa, Mudi Jebawa was one of the non-Buddhist school, Samkhya, and it was Mañjuśrī. So those two schools, and particularly Samkhya school, this is when it comes to describing what is the nirvana is, what is the freedom is. So then this is through single-pointed meditations, right, and applying the antidote to overcoming the afflictive emotions. So mind could reach the state, right? Mind could reach the state. So then, kind of studying the kind of all the afflictive emotions and started deteriorating, and that mind too become finally it cease to exist, and then only remain is Atma. Atma without consciousness, without form. So then they say that's the nirvana. Soul or Atma remain, right, alone. So no form, no consciousness. So similarly, and some kind of some really kind of talking about the liberation and nirvana, and even in Theravadan traditions, kind of Vaibhashika school point of views, Sautrantika school point of views. So their final achievement, this is when the Buddha Shakyamuni, right, while he was alive, he is the Buddha, he is Arhat. When the Buddha passed away, passing nirvana, so there is nothing left of continuum of his body and no consciousness. This is like the end of Bada Lamp, right? So this, what is implying, what is indicating is they are very kind of, they always have a suspicious that the cause of the suffering is the mind itself, right? So mind itself, when it starts creating mental construct, proliferating, so as long as there's the mind and activity of the mind, it's keep creating the mental construct, mental projections. So they think this is the cause of the samsara and the suffering. So this only ends when the mind totally ceased. So they're kind of, there's not much kind of valid reasoning to back up their point of view. Only speculations and suspicions. So, so this is what it says, yeah. And the precious garland says, therefore one become free from seeing thus, seeing the reality as it is. By what means does one sees? So this is kind of explaining the meditative equipoise, the ways of perceiving emptiness. Is just the awareness itself become total aware of the reality as it is, right? And then by the means, what does does one sees? If the questions, what this meditative equipoise sees, and the answer always in the conception, not within the direct perception of the emptiness. So answer in conventionally with thought, and then you say meditative equipoise is the wisdom that perceiving emptiness. So separating the wisdom realizing emptiness, and emptiness is the separation of the object and subject in the conception. So with this wisdom realizing emptiness, there is no answer, because with this, in the way of it seeing the emptiness, right, there is no separation. So this is like, for example, sometimes we call it in the Tibetan old saying, like what do you call people who cannot speak? Muted, right? Mute. Mm-hmm. So when the mute people, when they give the candy, and you ask, so how does it taste? So mute people cannot express, right? So if this person who can speak, and he will explain the taste of that candy, and kind of, using another like orange, mango, like that. He will just grow up on those imaginations. Oh, this is a little bit like that, a little bit this, right? So he is also using the imagination for kind of to separate what he tastes and what the experience from that taste. So from the tongue consciousness, from its own point of view, there is no different. There's no separate. But when it uses example, oh, this candy tastes a little bit like mango, a little bit like oranges, a little bit like this kind of spices, right? So in this way, he has to describe his taste. So the meditative equipoise, when this kind of realizing emptiness from its own point of view, from that wisdom, right, the point of view of that wisdom, there is no separation. See, there is no answer. So the answer has to be bring from conventional. So the conventional says meditative equipoise is the consciousness, the mind that observing in emptiness. Emptiness is the object that is perceived by that meditative equipoise. So therefore, making it, you just made it up, the separation of that, right? So this, like, the meditative equipoise itself, like a muted person who is experiencing taste of the candy, right? Sometimes, and then also we have another saying for, like, when you got confused, then we say muted person has seen God. So when he starts seeing God and he wants to say something, so it's a very hard time for him, very difficult. He's in a very difficult position but he sees that no one he sees it, but he cannot explain it. So, so that means this is what we use. This people who are so confused. So they think they know very fascinating things, but couldn't really describe it. So therefore one becomes free from seeing thus. Right. Free by seeing thus means free from misconception, ignorance, and imprint of the ignorance by seeing the reality as it is directly, right? So by what means does one sees? Now, so this meditative equipoise is realizing emptiness directly, like kind of inseparable, like milk and water. And by what manner you are able to kind of describe the subject and object as two separate phenomena. So what does one, but what means does one see? So then answer is conventionally. So conventionally, I can see them separate. Ultimately, right, I cannot, there is no any, descriptions of the subject and object is two separate phenomena. So then says, conventionally, I say by the mind. Right. Here in the response to the questions, through what kind of subjective act does one perceive suchness directly? To respond to these questions, it is stated that mind directly perceives the suchness on the conventional level. So conventional level, you can see them separate. Also, the places to the ultimate expanse state. It is just the body armors is cleansed by fire. For when armor tainted by all kind of stain is placed in the blazing fire, its stains are burnt, but not the armor. So this is, we call dojujukwe. So there's such, I think it looks like, and the firefighter, firemen, they use the costume, right? So when they go in the fire, so there's some kind of suit they wear, is right. This is like that. So when this suit, tainted by all kind of stains, that you cannot just put in a washing machine. You have to burn them. By burning it, it cleans. So the fire only burns the stains, not the suit itself. So this is kind of, stains are burned, but not the armor. Likewise, with this luminous mind, the wisdom realizing emptiness, written, right, with the stain born of desires and afflictive emotions, the stained. The fire, the nourishes, the fire of nourishes, the wisdom, burns the stain, but not the luminous mind itself. So this is the kind of, directly related to the people who think, right? After nirvana, Buddha passing nirvana, and when Buddha kind of died, and his consciousness also ceased to exist. So this was saying, there is no any condition that destroying the wisdom of the Buddha, right? The wisdom can, destroy or eliminate the afflictive emotions and the imprints. So there's no any antidote that could destroy and eliminate the wisdom itself. So the above state that just as one chainmail armor is placed in the fire burns off the stain, but not the armor itself. Likewise, when the stain of mind are burned off by the fire of the wisdom, only the stain are burned, and luminous mind is not, incinerated. Incinerated means destroyed, burned off. Incinerated. The nourishes of the meditative equipoise of the Aryas, Bodhisattvas, and the nourishes of the meditative equipoise of the Arya, Śrāvakas and the Pratika Buddha are equal when it comes to realizing the ultimate nature of the things directly. What time is it?
It's 3:37.
Okay. 3:37.
Or half an hour.
Should I stop or maybe just any questions? Maybe I will.
Well, yes, I think there's great danger here in accepting this description at face value without direct realization. I mean, after all, how do we know just by reason that consciousness or Buddha nature is not burned up? We're kind of, that's the description. We're kind of taking that on, I mean, I'm not taking it on faith. I guess the only way to find out is if you deeply contemplate this enough to have some very sharp realization of this. Of course, there's always the risk, even with sharp realization, that you're still deluding yourself. That's my comment.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't find my cursor. Geshe-la, I remember a while back, I think Larry asked, actually, it was about perfecting anger and how anger couldn't be perfected. And you explained that because the perfections are based in emptiness, I think. You gave it like an explanation as to how the perfections are the perfections. And I'm not sure if that ties in with like the ground and the bhumis that you were talking about. But do you remember that comment at all?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what I said at the time, but I can still say it again.
Okay, yes. how are the perfections perfect? There we go. Let's say that.
So, in Tibetan and Dharmakirti's text, it says, 10 tensions, 10 temperaments, sustainable basis, and by kind of it can increase by itself by familiarizations, two qualities, right? Mind, their bases are stable, and mind that can be increases or flourished by itself through familiarizations. So these two conditions are to prove such mind could be perfect. Such mind cannot be perfect, right? So now here, compassion can be perfect because compassion is based with sustainable basis, right? And then the reason why the compassion is based on the mind with sustainable, because through the familiarizations, right, it increases, right, endlessly. Now using that, for example, anger has sustainable basis, right? So the anger has no sustainable basis in the mind. So anger is like, anger is like, so no sustainable basis means, first we talk about how compassion has sustainable basis in the mind. So the compassion can be very much suitably fit within the mind, because the reason to compassion is first the suffering of the other sentient beings, and then the possibility of freedom of the such suffering of others. So that really perfectly fitted within the mind. So there is there is the realizations, there's the convictions that you can develop within the mind, that each suffering can be eliminated. Each suffering can be are suitable to overcome or eliminate. So this is the state of the mind you can, this is how the compassion can become the nature of the mind, right? So it can fit within the nature of the mind, because these two realizations is possibility of free from the suffering and the nature of the suffering. So that's why compassion is suitable to be fit within the nature of the mind. Now, so similar questions, when you similarly, anger is anger arises by projections, exaggerations, right? Misunderstanding and projections. So, and the second, the anger is just, it's just standing on two conditions. One is misprojections or exaggerations. And the second is, irritated state of mind. So these two, right? So these two, the irritations and mental projections. So these two allow this sustain the anger. So the exaggerations is not really a stable state of mind. It's keep changing. And also irritation state of mind is just part of emotional. Right? So that's why how many times you get angry, if you're trained to be angry more, so you cannot be angry for 2 hours, 4 hours, 3 hours, 24 hours, you cannot. The compassion, you can compassion for 1 hour, 24 hours, you can compassion even in dream state. So the why the compassion can be active, remain active 24 hours, how it is possible. Because we are more habituated, we are habituated in anger and attachment more than compassion. So once we develop compassion, this compassion becomes the nature of our mind. So anger cannot be our nature of the mind. So therefore, what we call it, adventitious is always, these are emotional, are adventitiously arising. It just sparkle from the certain things that not stable condition. So that's ten tension. Ten tension means it can so it has the stable, I don't know how to say it in English, it has the stable condition that could fit within the nature of the mind. So therefore, once you familiarize, it will just increase by itself. So anger, right? So we have the habit of anger for the many lives. But to be angry, so there's some kind of irritation always need to happen. It's irritated state of minds. Right? So that can spark out the anger. And sometimes there are irritations, unpleasant state of mind. If there is no exaggerations, again, there's no anger. Sometimes people have very looks angry, but not angry with anybody, but he himself angry. So so he couldn't find the second condition to brush out the anger. So he has to exaggerate. That person did this. These people have do these things, right? And then exaggerating, then the anger, get the perfect platform to play out, right? But you have unpleasant all the time, but you are ready to get angry, but you have no condition to let it out. So this is like snake in a hole. So there's it's not really biting people. It just stays inside the hole and trying to come out. So that's why the compassion and wisdom realizing emptiness, these has a very strong basis that can really merge with the consciousness mind. And when any time the consciousness play this mind, right, this quality of the mind, continuously they spontaneously arises. So so that's why I said, so mind which can perfectly suited or kind of fit with the nature of the mind, you can perfect them. Oh, Julie, can you talk again about the definition of awakening mind for bodhisattvas? So, for the Logan's questions, say suitable, a stable basis, and increases by familiarizations. If these two qualities, right, with any mental factors, that mental factor can perfect. Right, you can perfect them limitlessly. So the attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, arrogance, these are the basis. There's no kind of, stable basis. These are just, like a fire from paper, some bushes, right? So they just grow very far, like suddenly it grow very big and then just die. So die back. So yeah. So advantageous mind. Lubaba. So yeah, Julie's is awakening mind, definition awakening mind. So definition awakening mind, so ultimate awakening mind and awakening mind. So awakening mind is the real bodhicitta, right? So bodhicitta means sometimes you say mind with aspirations, right? Aspiring to attain the Buddhahood, right? That induced by the compassion. So that is called awakening mind. Right. So I'm trying to make a distinctions between mind and the mental factors. So one primary consciousness of the mind can have many mental factors. So the bodhicitta or awakening mind is the primary mind which has the mental factors as aspirations. So aspiring to attain the Buddhahood, strongly attaining the desire to attain the Buddhahood. It's not because you wanted to be Buddha, but because you want to save, free the sentient beings. Right? That aspirations, born from the great compassion for the sake of all sentient beings. And you develop that such aspiration, the mental factors, aspiring to attain the Buddhahood. So that's called awakening mind. So then the genuine awakening mind, and it has to be that mind, particular, the unique mind has to be spontaneous. So once that mind becomes spontaneous within you, and you become the Bodhisattva. So ultimate awakening mind is noble bodhisattvas wisdom realizing emptiness is directly perceiving the emptiness. So that's ultimate awakening mind. So yeah, a direct realization emptiness of the Bodhisattvas, noble being, so is known as ultimate awakening mind. So that very mind is uncontaminated mind. So uncontaminated means because this mind is free from ignorance and the stain of ignorance, has no influence or any stain from ignorance and its habits. So, yeah, again, going back to the Logan's question. And then the questions, previously I said the compassion, generosity, all right, love and compassion, generosities, and the moralities. So all this mind has a, stable basis with mind. So then say, and also there's some commentary that says these qualities can be nature of the mind, can be merged within the mind, nature of the mind. It can be so nature of the mind. Then some other question says, what do you mean by nature of the mind? This mind, anger is always generating within the mind, anger, attachment, all generated within the mind. Why anger and attachment is not within the nature of the mind? So then one of the disciples, the Lama Tsongkapha, Kidu Rinpoche, in his text, so nature, Rangshin, nature. So saying, so which part of the mind is the nature of the mind, or not nature, is determined by the mind itself when it's engaged or perceiving the object. The very object is the real or out of wrong perceptions. Like saying, so if, for example, so if mind perceiving black as white, so that mind is not a part of nature of the mind. If the mind sees the black as black, white as white, yellow as yellow, that mind can be nature of the mind. So which means, because mind can, through the realization, through the understanding, when it sees the reality as it is, these mental factors, right? These mental factors can, limitlessly kind of improve and increasing it. So anger attachment is kind of like, is the personality or the kind of, behaving of the drunk person. So sometimes when people get drunk, they say things, they do things, and in the morning they wake up and they feel shy, right? So that he did not really accept this is my nature. that's not me. So out of drunk, I did say that, or I did that. So those anger and attachments are like, mind got drunk or toxic by the distorted informations. Then this happens. If the anger has a perfect basis, solid basis, then Buddha should be angry. Bodhisattvas should be angry. Shakyamuni has angry many times. He beat his disciples many times. Then we see, the anger is nature of the mind. So as long as there's the mind, there's the anger always remain. So this is a very kind of, not easy kind of knowledge, because non-Buddhist school, many of non-Buddhist school, they still believe, right? They believe Nirvana, they believe Bhagavan, but they still could not really figure out why not. They always say, why not Bhagavan? Why not Bhagavan should not get angry? So they create, they through their imaginations, from their imaginations. Sometimes Shiva get angry, he destroy things. Sometimes Vishnu's and get angry and he kills thousand people. Because the kind of, not knowing the reality as it is, right? Not knowing the reality as it is. So they think the anger and attachment is the nature of the mind. So if this mind is acting like this, therefore you think this is the nature of the mind, and the person who get drunk or kind of intoxicated, and anything he behave, he do or say things, that has to be his nature. So then, then warriors will say, it's okay, it's nature of the body. So cancer cells, this is nature of the body. So that means you don't you don't need health care. So if those certain disease, that body illness, are not the nature of the body itself, not the nature of the element, and due to misbehave or miseating or sleeping, or so certain causes generate these things. And similarly, anger attachment is due to the distorted informations, misunderstanding or exaggerations, right? All this sparkle from unpleasant state of mind. So therefore, these are not nature of the mind. Yes, these are within the mind, but not the nature of the mind. Because they don't have stable basis within the mind. Because these cannot be, these do not have valid reason. It's not based on valid reason. So compassion is based on the valid reasoning, has the logic to support that, to back up the compassion. Right? Compassion is not blind. Compassion is a kind of desire to free other people from the suffering, because there's a possibility of the kind of elimination of that suffering. So I think even in the ordinary conversation, people always says, right, when people acted, right, not acted from their knowledge, that's acted from kind of arrogance, from their how wealthy they are, how powerful they are when they speak things. And people says he got drunk from his money, drunk from his power, right? So yeah, when he loses all wealth, that makes him so arrogant, and he coming back to the normal state, and he's humble, he's very polite. So that's his previous all these actions is not the nature of him. He got possessed. So that means every day, many times we got drunk, intoxicated from those distorted informations, make us angry and jealousies. Yeah, I hope this may convince. So I'll stop here. I will just read this one, right? This is the meditative equals Arya Bodhisattvas and nourishes of the meditative equipoise Arya, Śrāvakas, and the Pratika Buddha are equal when it comes to realizing the ultimate nature of the things directly, without any tent from the imprints of the ignorance. The reason one type of nourishes is defined as an Arya Bodhisattva's ground, while the other is not. Is owing to whether one has come under the sway of great compassions, whether one is endowed with the power of 1,200 set of qualities, and furthermore, as mentioned earlier. So that means now the kind of Śrāvaka, the Arya Śrāvakas, Arhat, Śrāvaka, and the Pratika Buddha, they both have direct realization emptiness that is still uncontaminated wisdom. And Bodhisattva's first bhumi and second bhumi, they too possess the meditative equipoise that directly perceive emptiness. But the question is, all these arhats wisdom realizing emptiness is uncontaminated, and Bodhisattva's first bhumi's direct meditative equipoise is also uncontaminated. And why the Bodhisattva, noble being, a direct realization emptiness is called a bhumi, not the others. So then this is what sustained that wisdom. There are big difference. So true arhat, their direct realization emptiness is not sustained by the great compassion, bodhicitta, and the perfection, the generosity, all of the things. And a lot of accumulations, merits. And the Bodhisattvas, noble beings, their direct realization emptiness sustained by the great compassion, bodhicitta, and generosity, and perfection of the morality. And then kind of, years of accumulations, merit is kind of backing up or supporting that particular wisdom. So that's why this is the bhumi, not the others. Yeah, okay. Mañjuśrī Rinpoche, Majebana, Jishiji, Jeba Nyamba, Mebanyam, Kone Kondo Pevers, Tony Tawa Rinpoche, Majebana, Jishiji, Jeba Nyamba, Mebanyam, Kone Kondo Pevers, Pama Simje Tamje, Dadan Denjuji, Nendro Tamje, Tadu Tonga,
Mañjuśrī Khana Sushun Tada Gunji Molon Drubji Ruchi Karera Vekobe Shegamsu Pendan Dewa Madun Joe Ne Jerezava Tinzi Jazo Ye Shabe Sideba.
May the precious Buddha mind not yet born arising grow. May the born have no decline but increase forevermore. May the precious mind realizing emptiness not yet born arising grow. May the born have no decline but increase forevermore. Due to all these merits, may all father and mother sentient beings have all happiness. And may all lower realms be empty forever. Wherever there are bodhisattvas, may all their prayers be accomplished immediately. In the sacred land surrounded by snow mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All powerful, generous, infinite. Remain in this world until samsara ends.
Thank you.